All right, welcome on. We're going to do at least the beginning of our awards here. Most of them, we're going to leave defense for a whole special defense episode later this week. But let's do some faces for the thumbnail. Danny, your reaction to how difficult it was to choose your MVP this year.
Let's see.
Well, I've got another one.
Okay,
But
go ahead.
my reaction to how hard it was to choose All-NBA this year.
Yeah, we'll get into that in just a little
bit. All right, high energy. Let's pick it up. Pick it up for the podcast. We're on TV or what passes for it these days. Here we go. Welcome on. The penultimate Sunday of the season is in the books. Much has been going on, but you don't care about boring regular season games and things like who's going to be what seed and who's going to be what seed in the lottery and what teams are intentionally losing even harder than they already were. What teams are almost losing to those teams that are intentionally losing almost harder than they already were. We got to talk about awards here. And we have what I would probably, at least in my own mind, consider to be the closest MVP race since we have started Dunc'd On in 2015.
I wholeheartedly agree. And there, to say that these two players, Nikola Jokic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, in no particular order, are in the same tier is, I think, kind of understating things a bit. They're incredibly close. And while I have my choice here, and I don't think that the final week of games is going to move things too dramatically in that respect, I completely I think it's completely acceptable for the other to win. Like, it is completely justified. Both of them are deserving winners. Both of them have basically, to me, equal weight cases.
Before we get into the statistical case for all these, I do want to go through all of it and let y'all know everything that we've considered. I think this close of an MVP race deserves that we go through pretty much everything. But what are your criteria for MVP, Danny? Let's start with that because it is somewhat open-ended.
It is open-ended, but for me, it is the player who most cohesively impacted winning over the course of a season. And that includes the amount of time they played, because that means you don't have to have a replacement and everything else. Fortunately, that is actually pretty close between the two gentlemen that are at the top. But really, so it's a mix of offense and defense. It's a mix of team building. It's how, like, individual scoring. It really is. But that's kind of the way I do it, is like, who impacted their team winning the most this year.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for me as well. I do have a tiebreaker in terms of just who I think the better player is overall, which again, I think is extremely close, though. Top 10 players in the NBA, I did pick Nikola Jokic. Although I will say that John had a pretty good argument in favor of Shai that I want to get into a little bit. He actually, I think, picked Jokic above Shai too, but he presented, I thought, a pretty good argument. Let's just talk about the cases for these two gentlemen here.
So I think that you can kind of get into some of the stuff in terms of their role within their team's offense. Do you think, is that kind of where you want to start? Where do you like? Because it's hard.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, so let's just go. We'll go through some of the one number metrics that we use. The backwards looking version of EPM. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander 9.2, Nikola Jokic 8.3. However, Jokic has a defensive EPM of 0.7. Shai is plus 2.7, which I think is just way too high. I personally do not put stock in the number. I think he's a positive defender. He's more valuable defender, certainly at his position, than Jokic is. But no, like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is not one of the best defensive players in basketball. And then there's also a E-wins stat, which basically EPM times how much you played. And again, Shai is ahead there at 11.7 versus 10.0. Another stat we use, DPM, which is more of a forward-looking stat, just trying to measure how good these guys are. Basically has them neck and neck, both at 6.6, which is a fair amount ahead of anyone else. And then I think you mentioned that you feel like the playing time aspect is pretty similar for them.
As of the last time I looked, it was very close.
Yeah, so here I'll give the numbers because it's tough because Nikola Jokic missed I think 4 games with paternity leave earlier in the season, and so that would make things a lot closer. Jokic 37 minutes a game, Shai 34, Shai 2,531 minutes, Jokic about 100 less than that. 66 games played for Jokic, 74 for Shai. But I do give the tie goes to the guy to me who's played more games if the minutes are similar. And part of the reason that Shai hasn't played as many minutes is because they've completely destroyed people when he's on the floor, true, but also when he was off the floor, which some of that he deserves credit for. Other of that, it's Jokic doesn't deserve blame, I don't think, for the negative 8.3 net rating when the Nuggets for the Nuggets when he's off the floor. What are some of the other things that we're looking at here as part of these cases?
Well, so let's say in terms of their efficiency as individual scorers. So Jokic, and they don't play the same position, but Jokic, 67% true shooting this year, including a completely ridiculous 42% on 4.5 threes per 36 minutes. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and also ridiculous, even more ridiculous for his position, 64% true shooting, 37% on 6 threes per 36. And they also, getting to the line, Shai 9.4 free throw attempts per 36 minutes, Jokic less, 6.4 per 36.
Yeah, although interestingly, their fouls drawn per 36 are not that different. Shai is at 6.5, Jokic is at 5.8. He just gets fouled off the ball more than Shai does. And then if we want to expand that to our stats, our creation stats, total creation. So that is the percentage of the time that you either shoot, throw a pass that leads to a shot or free throws, or turn it over, almost exactly equal. Shai 49.1, Jokic 49.5. Jokic skews more towards passing, and that is passing creation is 20%. Shai is 15. Scoring creation, Shai is 31.5%. Jokic 25.5%. Turnovers are a bit lower for Shai.
And as a point of reference, that 20% passing, playmaking creation for Jokic, that's one of the highest in the league. Like that's close to Tyrese Halliburton levels.
Yeah, I think he is third in the NBA behind Trey and Tyrese Halliburton, which of course is just unbelievable considering that Nikola Jokic is a center. And I think he is the best passer in the NBA. And you can, and when you look at the effect on his team's offense, this is a group that does not have a lot of shooting. Jamal Murray, for a large portion of this season, was either not at his highest level or has been out. And yet the Nuggets still, with Nikola Jokic on the floor, have a 125.4 offensive rating. It's gotten to the point where in doing all of our other position rankings, you brought up this idea of the Jokic tax, or basically these guys who are so efficient playing with Jokic, like, you got to discount that if they're in any other situation. The Denver Nuggets are 19 points per 100 possessions better offensively when Nikola Jokic is on the floor. And then Shai, still in his own right, I mean, pretty amazing. He's third on this list of viable candidates for All-NBA with a 122.4 on-court offensive rating. And again, they have a little bit better shooting than the Nuggets do. I would say they have a little more overall offensive talent than the Nuggets do, but not a ton. And Shea has really lifted that group pretty well. And then getting into the stats of just like how good they have been, the OKC when Shea is on the floor. I mean, that is probably, to me, Shea's best argument here.
Yeah, I mean, the Thunder have a completely preposterous plus 17.3 net rating with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on the floor. That is ludicrous. It's kind of even hard to process. The plus 10.1 that the Nuggets are with Jokic is still incredible, but it isn't plus 17.3.
And John, the point that he made that I thought was a good one in top 10 players in the NBA was, I don't know, as unbelievable as Nikola Jokic is offensively, and as awesome as the Thunder are too, I don't know that you could have a team that would have a 17.3 net rating with Jokic on the floor, because I just don't think your defense could quite get to that level. Now, Jokic can certainly elevate a lot of really middling offensive players. You could put good defenders around him, but he still is a pretty ground-bound center. He's better than, his rim protection stats, which are awful. Some of the worst in the league would indicate. Like, I think you can build a good defense around him, but also center is just your most important defensive position. If you're not getting great defense there, then it becomes really hard to have a great overall defense. And then you're not going to have that kind of just like unbelievably great team. Now, 10.1 is a pretty goddamn good net rating. He's been in the 12s previously when the Nuggets have been at their best. I mean, that's still plenty good to win a championship, but it's also not all-time great good. And I don't know that you could still get there. Now, this is a very much watered down argument of the incorrect one that I had before, that you just weren't going to win a championship with Jokic at all as your center. And part of that was that he got a lot better defensively, I would say. They put more pieces around him. Also, they didn't actually really beat anyone in that championship run, although they did dominate it. And they have not won any other championships. But I mean, I still think Nikola Jokic is the best offensive force in the league by far, one of the 5 greatest offensive players of all time. But I just wanted to throw that out there for consideration, that like the Oklahoma City Thunder have been an absolute all-time great team this year, and Shai has one of the best on-court net ratings ever. And can you build that type of group around Jokic? I do question that a little bit. Again, this is like, we're talking about, 99.9th percentile instead of 99th percentile here, but that's how close this race is.
I'm going to put another argument in favor of Shai out there, which is the margin between these two with the offensive, with them on the floor offensively, is only 3 points per 100 possessions. And when you consider, yes, Jokic is elevating a very limited group of players, with they're playing, Aaron Gordon and Peyton Watson and Christian Brown, none of whom can really reliably create their own shot. Jamal Murray, of course, can. Russell Westbrook, of course, can. But relatively speaking, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has a wonderful supporting cast. That isn't a strength of those guys either. And we see that not only in the offensive rating when Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is off the floor, which is a 111.4, significantly better than Jokic off, but still much more pedestrian. And we've seen, at different moments in time, like we did the whole segment on a 1560 recently about like, it was surprising how good the Thunder were on offense when Shai was off the floor, when Jalen Williams was hurt. But they're still, not great. And so I think at times we've given Gilgeous-Alexander too little credit for how much he's elevated his offense, because I do agree that it's less than Jokic, but that the idea behind Shai for MVP is that, to me, is that he is a superior defender, especially relative to position, and that the offensive margin, as great as Jokic has been, is actually not as severe.
Yeah, that said, I Jokic is just so resilient, and he sets up just such great shots for his teammates. He also is an amazing transition force at this point too, with some of his outlet passing and hit ahead passing. Like that's a big way that Denver has managed to keep their offense going this year, with the spacing being worse maybe than it's ever been, because they've just been killing teams in transition. So I do consider Jokic to still be on another level than Shea on the offensive end. I think he just causes a few more matchup problems. You can't, like, the idea of, like, we've seen, for example, teams be like, oh, we're going to take the ball out of Shea's hands. And that actually kind of works. I mean, now that's the Thunder should be able to figure that out. If you're getting double teamed at half court, you've done your job as an offensive player. But you can't even do that on Jokic, right? I think there's been maybe one game, which would be that Laker game, where Jokic has kind of been taken out of things. And, Shea has had this big streak of the, what is it, 69 straight games or something with over 20 points or over. So saying he's been taken out of it is probably too much. Maybe it's more really late that's happened in a few games that they've blown at the end, but obviously they've still been awesome. So I do think there is more of an unsolvable aspect to Jokic, particularly the way he shot the three this year too. I mean, that's the other thing that it's just you cannot deal with, where, okay, maybe you're stopping him inside and now he's just gonna, like, there's the list of players who can stop Nikola Jokic inside, but then also can actually chase him around the 3-point line. Like, it's basically, is that 0 players long? Like, it is.
It probably is. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
maybe we'll see something in the playoffs, but I don't think we will.
So then you get to the defensive component, and Shea, his offense or his defense has been called overrated so often now that, at least in our, what we like to consider intelligent basketball circles, I think that's pretty well known at this point. But considering his role as a ball dominant player, and also the fact that he plays point guard, so he can be your weakest defender, he plays that role extremely well as a help defender, as a nail guy. He's just really, he can make plays at the rim, contest 16% of opponent shots, allows 64% shooting. That's a little bit lower number than we've seen from him in the past. I don't know how long he's going to be able to keep this up at age 26 to really be a force in that way. Although we've seen even guys like Derek White or Danny Green maintain it for a while. So I mean, he's one of the best rim protecting guards ever. And he certainly deserves credit for that. And he's not someone who's going to get attacked defense. So he might get attacked just because there's no one else to attack, but he doesn't deserve it in any kind of a way. And Jokic, 70% shooting a lot at the rim, contest percentage, also below the positional average. And for that reason, schematically, if you're really going up against a good team, he's got to get out on the floor defensively, and that does open up some vulnerabilities against some of the best offenses going the other way. Any other stats that we need to talk about here? I mean, I think we've been through pretty much all of it at this point. It's just these guys are both pretty bulletproof, I would say.
They are. And it's like,
maybe we'll talk clutch stats, actually. Let me get that in front of me while you react to that.
No, I mean, their cases are both like, they're only assailable by each other. Like these are really strong MVP seasons by any measure. Like Bill Simmons has this idea of like MVP weights, and these are two really, really strong MVP seasons. It's a shame that one of them won't win, but that's just the nature of things.
Yeah. So in the clutch, and now Shea, of course, doesn't benefits from the fact that they've blown everyone out, or maybe is hurt by it, depending on what you would say. But when he has been in the clutch, he's been absolutely dominant. Thunder are 14-7 in clutch games, 66% true shooting for him on 37.5% traditional usage. And Nikola Jokic.
Well, so this is fascinating. So Jokic individually, 63% true shooting on 37 usage. So a little bit less efficient. But the Nuggets offense is a 127.8, which is even better than the Thunder. The Thunder actually, so these teams, because of the Thunder defense is way better, as you'd expect. Their net ratings are almost the same, but this gets into something that Seth does in terms of how you get in the clutch. So they both have like a over a plus 15, like plus 15.4 for Jokic, plus 15.8 for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But the Thunder are 14-7 in the clutch. The Nuggets are 17-14. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and if you want to adjust more for how they have entered the clutch, yeah, Nuggets worst clutch record than they've had in the past, 19-15, and OKC is 15-8. So, but that's Denver is actually, because they've trailed a lot more, they've actually won 1.7 games more than expected, whereas OKC has basically been neutral because that 15-8 record, OKC is more often up when entering the clutch because they're a more dominant team. And Jokic, particularly because the non-Jokic minutes all take place before the clutch. It's going to be a little different for him. All right, what was your final pick? I was leaning Jokic before we started this. I was going to hold my idea or my final selection in abeyance until now. I'm now kind of moving more towards Shai than I was before. Where have you ended up?
So I think Nikola Jokic is the better player. We did top 10 players recently. I said that. The more I've thought about it, the more I think I have to pick Shai. I think that he has had the better season. I think that the idea that I brought up, and this is a version of what John was saying, of that you can have a better defense with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as a part of it. Even if he's not the best player, he can be a part of it. And their offense hasn't been that much worse, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has a huge part in that. So I came into this podcast with Jokic 1, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander 2, working through all of this with you. I'm changing it. I'm having Shai number 1.
Oof, man. And Shai playing the 74 games, Jokic 66. Like, I desperately am looking for anything that I can find to be a tiebreaker.
That's what I was doing too. I was like, I felt like first I thought I was looking for a tiebreaker. Then I thought I was looking for a reason to pick Jokic. And then that's when I'm like, I can't pick him. If I'm working this hard to be like, it should be Jokic, then I think then for me, it has to be Shai. But it's, again, it's splitting hairs.
And honestly, if he had played 8 fewer games than Shai just due to injury, I think that would just be it. I would be all right, feel very comfortable with Shai. I like penalizing someone for paternity leave. I really don't. Not that he gives a shit, honestly, but I like that is also like doesn't make me feel great that he's like, if it were 74 against 70,
it is value. Like, I agree with you, and you and I are both recent fathers. Like, but it is still time that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander played. It's because it feels like if you're not punishing Jokic for it at all, then you're kind of punishing Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for playing more. Like, to that extent, it's hard though. I mean,
well, I think, honestly, even the 4 games that matters at least a little bit. And again, I don't like Jokic. I would say he probably is a little more durable than Shai in terms of like the minutes load that he's had to handle this year has been pretty crazy. And also just the stress of those minutes too. Like Shai, he's like, the Thunder are just going to win all these games in like huge blowouts. Like Denver needs a big performance from Jokic every single night. Like he's got to carry everything, particularly with Murray so limited. Like he's had all these games where he's had to play like the whole second half and like, so the 61-point triple double. He's playing over 50 minutes. It's just totally insane. So yeah, I mean the workload thing, I don't know if I can use that as a tiebreaker. I think ultimately what I just have to come down to is that the offense is close enough, and then the defense for Shai is just, it's not even that it's so much better. It's just that it has the potential to be part of something that's so much better. And Oklahoma City has some, like, the greatest defensive talent maybe that's ever been assembled on one team. But also, like anyone else, any other perimeter player in the league Like, he's easily the best of all the high usage perimeter players in the league on defense.
Absolutely.
Like, it's
I mean,
like not even close.
It's him and Tatum. Tatum does it
Okay.
differently.
Yeah. I was, but I wouldn't say Tatum has the same type of load as Shea does.
Agree.
Yeah. But yeah, and certainly in terms of guards, I think there's really nobody that I would consider comparable to him among the high usage players. Yeah, I think I mean I still do think Jokic is a better player. So I always say, like, that's why I came into this too. I'm like, I think Jokic is better. I think this like a tie goes to him, but I do think it is going to be Shea for me too. I mean, there have been other close races before, but I always felt confident in who I was going to pick. I've never gone into, and you know what? I mean, we do have a week left in the season. The other thing too is, like, Denver, I mean, they might, I usually don't go into this, but like they may not even be a home court advantage team in the West the way this is going, not due to Jokic's issues by any means, but it would also, like, the fact that the Thunder have been one of the best teams of all time. I mean, I do think like, Shea seems like the obvious pick in everything. Then other than that, I think Jokic is a little bit better than him. So I ultimately have to go with him, I think. But I really, really struggled with this. And I mean, I may come back on here a week from now and be like, you know what? Actually, I do think it's Jokic. Although Shea's case is complete, basically, at this point. Like, this is all garbage time in the season right now. It doesn't matter.
They clinched the number one seed weeks ago.
Yeah, and I think even in the Cavs can't catch them at this point, or won't.
Yeah, especially after that loss to Sacramento.
Ooh, yeah, Sacramento's really got the Cavs number. All right, the rest of my MVP ballot I thought was pretty easy. Jason Tatum, number 3. Giannis, number 4. I thought that was a pretty obvious. I mean, I think there's some people who have Giannis as the better player. I didn't in our top 10 players in the NBA. Jason Tatum, though, has also played 350 more minutes than Giannis as well, in 6 more games.
I think Giannis has been the better per minute player, but the minutes are not close. And so Jason Tatum, for me, when he gets number 3, Giannis gets number 4.
And then my number 5 was more difficult. I didn't think there's a great number 5 candidate this year, and some of the usual suspects have been injured or ineligible. Luka Doncic has been a fixture on this list for a while. Obviously, Joel when he's qualified, which is a rarity. Kawhi Leonard, who actually was I think on my ballot last year at 5, of course didn't play until January and is only recently coming on. Anthony Davis was maybe starting off at that type of level. Then he got hurt. LeBron James, if he'd played 2024 the way he played 2025, would have probably got this spot. Instead, though, to me, it goes with Evan Mobley.
Same. And it's actually an argument that I think I originally formulated with Victor Wembanyama back when we were talking about his potential MVP ballot candidacy, which was the idea basically is that the all-in-one metrics are a little bit lower on Mobley relative to some of the other guys in this area, like the aforementioned Stephen Curry or his own teammate Donovan Mitchell. But this will come up. We're not doing defense in this podcast, but let's use EPM as an example here. EPM has Evan Mobley's overall as a plus 3.9. However, that plus 3.9 is plus 2.3 on offense and plus 1.6 on defense. That plus 1.6 on defense is more than 2 points of EPM below the top players in defensive EPM. And so part of the logic that I used with Wembanyama back a few months ago was, if you grade that out to where I think it is, which is, if not the best defensive player in the league, among the best defensive players in the league, well, then you add that to his tally, then that gets him up into this range. And I believe that he is that good. And so for me, moving Evan Mobley, like, so correcting that, if, and I'm not using anything as gospel, but it helps reflect that, to me, the most valuable defensive players in this, or Raptor, or anything else, like, it's just a little bit off on that. And so if I calibrate that correctly to me, well, then that makes him the number 5.
Yeah, a lot of people I think are going to give this spot to Donovan Mitchell just because he's the most famous Cav, and I just don't think it's anywhere close. It's not close even in the
I mean,
yeah.
Mitchell hasn't even been the best Cav offensively this year. Like,
No,
it's to me,
no, he's got a, but
strange
like
case.
average true shooting on the season, and has not had his best season shooting the 3 ball either. And he's been lauded like for taking a step back and letting these other guys flourish, but also you would think that that would lead to him having one of his most efficient offensive seasons, and that hasn't necessarily been the case. Yeah, and Mobley in all the impact metrics, he's right in the same range as like Steph and Jaren Jackson Jr. and his teammate Darius Garland, and so and LeBron is lower because of some of the on-off stuff. And it probably Curry and LeBron would probably be the two that I had the closest here. I mean, Evan Mobley too, of every candidate here, he has the second best on-court net rating at plus 12.5. And I think, especially when you consider what he's done defensively, carrying some extremely limited units, particularly when he plays center.
Mhm.
That means a lot to me. And he's like a really solid offensive player who's very efficient as well. I'm not going to spoil my defensive player of the year. That's going to be a different episode. We're going to do all of our defense categories, all defense, worst team, all defense, etc. later in the week. But he won it for me last year. He certainly is a very, very good defensive player, or not last year, but last month. So he'll be in very heavy consideration. And he hasn't played quite as many minutes as some guys, but again, that's because Cleveland's been blowing a lot of people out, and he's played 68 games, so there's nobody else really has a massive advantage in terms of games played over him. The other guy I'll shout out to is Victor Wembanyama. Probably would have got this spot if he had made it through the entire season healthy. Of course, he didn't. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that Mobley is like the strongest 5th place on an MVP ballot ever, but I think it's pretty obviously him, particularly just because like Curry, LeBron, like they've just had like big lulls in their season, and the Cavs have just dominated the whole year.
So I think we can transition into All NBA, and the 5 gentlemen we've discussed. And I don't always do this because, as longtime listeners know, my criteria for All NBA are different than my criteria for MVP, because MVP factors in games played. For me, if you've played enough for All NBA, then it's just who is better in the amount of who is better per minute. But they've been the 5 best players. So for me, it's still that 5. The next 5, I did think, like you, I thought it was relatively straightforward. Stephen Curry, LeBron James. So LeBron, the all-in-one metrics have him lower. We've talked about this curiosity a lot this year, where the Lakers have shot ridiculously well when LeBron has been off the floor, and unusually poorly when he's been on the floor. I ding him for that less. Do we want to talk about Curry or LeBron, or are they just kind of clear-cut second team guys?
I think it's pretty clear cut with the surges that those teams, their teams have had, and also just what their track records are as well. I'm very comfortable with them.
And then for me, the other clearest cut guy who's second team is Darius Garland, not Donovan Mitchell, but Darius Garland, because Garland, the Cavs have this ridiculous 123.1 offensive rating when Garland is on the floor. Garland is an important part of that. 42.5% total creation. He's effective as an individual player. 60% true shooting for a player with his role is very impressive. He does well on threes. I don't think we need to go through everything. But for me, Garland was the next clearest case.
Yeah, and I had Donovan Mitchell there too, along with Jaren Jackson Jr.
Yep.
Jalen Brunson, we're going to assume that he's going to qualify. I think he came back today, and what do they have? There are 3 or 4 more games, and that will get him there, barely, but that pushes him down to third team. And Jaren, he's been healthy all year, which has been also, I know he missed his time due to foul trouble. He's played 71 games. I thought maybe that he was going to be felled by this ankle injury, and then he came back in like like a week, which is pretty incredible. And yeah, I mean, Jaren, the impact metrics are very much in love with his season. And I know the Grizz have faltered some recently, but they are one of the best teams in basketball throughout most of the season, and he was the big driver of that, especially considering that Bane has had a down year, and that Ja has as well, and hasn't played that much.
We will talk about Jaren in the defensive pod as well, but I want to talk just for a quick beat about his offense, because that won't be a part of that podcast. And Jaren Jackson Jr. this year, 59% true shooting, 34% total creation is less than the highest heights in this, but it's larger. Like, he has a larger role within the Grizzlies offense than Karl Anthony Towns does for the Knicks. And so he has a big part to play. The Grizzlies have had this year where, like, for me, it was a part of why at different times I've had Taylor Jenkins high in the coach of the year conversation, where they've been, they haven't been ridiculous, but they've been very good even when John Morant's been off the floor. And so, yeah, I think Jaren, he deserves a spot on the second team.
Yeah, so I had Mitchell filling out my second team. The easy part about it, maybe second team, third team was a little bit more difficult. But considering that we're positionless now, and considering the 65 game rule, I really thought there was like a very clear cutoff at 15. Like, I didn't really struggle with what 15 players I was going to have on my All-NBA. I might have moved a few pawns around between second and third team, but ultimately it seemed like it was pretty clear cut. Here's my third team. Be interested to know if you had anyone else in heavy consideration, or you agree with me. Jalen Brunson, mentioned him already, just a huge offensive force for the Knicks. If he qualifies, I think he has to be on there. Anthony Edwards, adding the 3-point shooting this season, I think was huge. And he's not a great defensive player throughout the meat of the game, but he certainly doesn't get attacked, and then he can really lock in towards the end defensively. Cade Cunningham really came on. Pistons really came on. He'll be an interesting discussion for most improved as well. Maybe we'll get into a little bit more of what he's done, but especially the importance that he's had in the Pistons offense, the way that they've run, the way he's driven that has been pretty solid. I mean, this is our first time seeing Cade with really any kind of real NBA spacing around him, and I think he's taken advantage. Even though his individual efficiency is not that great, he's statistically is probably the weakest of these guys, just in terms of his individual stats, although his creation load is absolutely massive. But again, I'm just like, who are we taking over him? My last two are Jalen Williams and Karl Anthony Towns. Is that do we have the same 15 or do we not?
So I'll tell you who the other guy that I have in this consideration. So you said it was a clear 15 for you. I have one other guy, and that's Tyrese Halliburton. And I've been
he would have been the closest for me. I would say.
And so Halliburton. Let me give you the case. Give you the case for him. I haven't actually decided who my 15th is going to be. But so I'll give some of the case for Tyrese, because I think that it's worthy of it. So he has this gargantuan role within the Pacers offense. And it is true that they're not at the same, like they're at basically 118 offensive rating with Halliburton on the floor, significantly better than when he's off. And his individual efficiency, 61.5% true shooting, in part because he's making 39% of his threes, taking 8.2 on pretty tough difficulty, 5 self-created per 36. He is a bad defensive player, to be abundantly clear. But for me, the thing that's most interesting comparing him with Karl Anthony Towns is like, this is sort of in a weird way, it's a parallel of what we talked about with Jokic, which is Karl Anthony Towns being a bad defensive player. Even if he's not nearly as bad as Halliburton, it's harder to build a great team around that. I'm not saying the Knicks are bad in any way, shape, or form, but it is something that lingers a little bit with me. Towns is this great offensive player.
Yeah, I guess just at this point in the race, it's like, yeah, you know what? If you could build a 50-win team around this guy, great. Like, you could be third team All-NBA this year.
Exactly, and it's and it is really unfortunate that like Luka and Wembanyama aren't pushing this harder. Like that would have made it really tough. So yeah, for me, that last spot is Halliburton versus Towns, but I am gonna go with Towns in that last spot.
Yeah, I did too. Also, I weight the first half to 2/3 of the season higher than the last third, just because there are so many ridiculous auto wins by that point. And it seems like all of these teams basically are playing well, but that's part of why.
Mhm.
And so that's and Tyrese, yeah, just not quite as dominating. I thought he just wasn't that great. I mean, we're talking about him as one
Especially
of the
the first
most
half of the year.
disappointing players. Yeah, for like the first couple of months, and Towns has been pretty consistent all the way through. Certainly, his defense was kind of rough at the start, but it's not like the Knicks weren't winning games at that point. And Jalen Williams, to me, I mean, I imagine he'll probably make it from the actual voters just because they'll be like, oh, we need to have another Thunder player. But I think he actually has earned this. And yeah, he is not the biggest flaw in his game is that he's not going to push you to a huge height offensively as a primary guy with Shea off the floor. But he's also like a really good complement to Shea. He makes his shots. He's fantastic in transition. Another guy who can play basically any role you want him to on defense, whether it's rim protector, whether it's nail help, whether it's zoning up behind the play. He hasn't been asked to do it as much this year because they just have so many guys, but he absolutely can either switch on to a score or really lock in on that guy throughout the entire game if needed. We saw him do that against Kyrie in the playoffs last year. And he's a very solid offensive player as well. So, I mean, is he quite as good as your like absolute championship option number 2 guy offensively? No, I wouldn't say so, but he's way better than that guy defensively.
Yeah.
And again,
And
like he's another one of these guys where the guy playing that number 2 perimeter role offensively usually doesn't have the level of defense to where now you can have this like greatest of all time level of defense.
and there's an argument that Jalen Williams is kind of he is done a little bit of a disservice by having to be the primary in some of these non-Shea lineups when that's just not his strength. And so like some of his efficiency numbers
Yeah.
might be a
Well, it's
little
not
bit
even
worse than
having the
Jalen Williams.
primary. It's that there's no secondary to him as the primary.
True. Yeah, that's another factor. But for me, the reason it's hard for me to if I even wanted to remove Jalen Williams is that stretch where he had to do so much defensively when either not Cade, Chet Holmgren
Chet.
or Isaiah Hartenstein was out, and they just like he played a lot of not only backup center in terms of like, oh, he's the tallest guy. No, he was actually playing, in their scheme at times. He was playing center defensively, and that's a really hard job. The Thunder did beautifully defensively in a lot of those minutes. So like that's a big lift, and he did a fantastic job of it.
Yeah, and KD is probably not going to make the 65 games. He would have been someone to make this a little more interesting, although certainly I'm going to discount anybody who's been within 350 miles of that. I think that's how far LA is from Phoenix. 350 miles of that that Phoenix situation. But yeah, it doesn't look easy to get there. Is there anyone who like would any of these answers for you have changed if the 65 game rule didn't exist, where you're like, oh man, there's someone who is so amazing in 55 games that I would have picked them?
I've said before that my general line is half a team's games, but I think Wembanyama being at 46, that's too
Yeah,
few. Like it's
too few. Yeah,
it's too few. And so Luka by the end, he might get to 50. That might
yeah, but he
be
hasn't
that
been that good this year though. He's
ex-
had big stretches where he wasn't
I
that
mean,
good.
no, I mean
Yeah,
to me he's been better than a lot of the guys on my list overall.
yeah,
But he's
but
done it
not.
himself.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
So, like, I mean, even as somebody who is more aggressive with it, who is more aggressive with like not leaning heavily on games played. No, I don't think so. I had a brief second where I was like, oh, like Jimmy Butler's been important for the Warriors run. And his lack of inclusion here is not solely because of the nonsense with the Heat, but that is a factor because there were games that he didn't play in and games that he didn't play great in. And if he had been it's hard to say where the season would have gone. But there is a way that Jimmy Butler would have made one of my All NBA teams. But the way that things were in Miami, he wasn't. It wasn't close.
Yeah, a few other guys that were kind of bouncing around my head a little bit would have been Ivica Zubats.
Hmm.
Just not a good enough offensive player to me to really get there. Davis played 49 games. So yeah, again, like some of these guys, like if Victor had gotten to like 55, then yeah, I would have said I would want to have him on. I mean, we haven't really had anybody truly get screwed by the 65 game rule in the first 2 years, at least in my
I mean,
opinion.
Halliburton did in a different way, but
Well, yes. I mean, and he wouldn't have played the 65 games had it not been for that rule. And we'll see. I mean, hopefully we're not going to be saying that he's not the same. It seems like he's on the mend. He's actually played a ton this year. Kyrie was another one who would have been on one of my teams if he didn't tear the ACL for sure, but he only made it to 50 games in the end. Let's do coach of the year.
Yeah, and for me, so I have had Kenny Atkinson number one for pretty much the whole year. And for me, it was Atkinson versus Mark Daignault. And I have switched the two of them. I now have Mark Daignault in part due to acknowledging just the sheer incredible run that the Oklahoma City Thunder are on. But also going back to that idea that I talked about with Shea, which is the Oklahoma City Thunder having a 120.6 clean the glass offensive rating when you consider their overall offensive talent, and like they don't have that many guys that can initiate offense. And yes, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is fabulous. It has taken a lot of great coaching. It's taken more great coaching for them to be as good as they are offensively than for me for them to be as good as they are defensively. And Atkinson, to me, a clear cut number two if he's not number one. But what Mark Daignault has done this year to have the Thunder as an all-time great team is incredible.
Yeah, I went with Kenny number one still because the Cavs were pretty damn good themselves. Sure. And I think while I try to avoid more than just about anybody, except maybe you, it would seem, falling into the trap of, let's just pick whoever was the best story on a team that had a coach that wasn't that good last year. Like, J.B. Bickerstaff actually was a good coach. Like, I think that's pretty clear. Not a great playoff coach, but I don't think I didn't feel like he was leaving that much on the table during the regular season with this group. And yet, Atkinson has just gotten these crazy career years out of all these guys. And JB was done a disservice by all the injuries and the fact that Garland just wasn't close to himself. But
Cleveland, it's fair to note, Cleveland was 18th in offense last year, but they were 7th the year before when Darius Garland didn't have his jaw broken. So they were a very good offense. Not as good as they are this year, but they're also having this preposterous shooting season collectively.
Which is toned down a little. But I think Kenny, to me, I also thought, fair or not, but I didn't think Mark Daignault coached a great game in the NBA Cup final. is that
not a regular season game?
Daignault is number two for me. I still think I have him above Atkinson in the coach rankings. But this was just the combination of it being a surprise that they're this good and that he was the new coach, and that they, this isn't, JB tripling their wins from last year is pretty incredible. But also you're not getting, like, the NBA runs on championships. Like, the Cavs are a championship contender. No one had them as that before the season. I think as great as all these guys that we're going to talk about have been, Kenny Atkinson is the one guy who's gotten his team to be a championship contender, at least in my view, that just wasn't considered to have that type of talent before this.
My number three is an interesting part of that conversation. But I want to shout out some other people before we talk about that person. I'm not Joe Mazzulla didn't make my ballot. I don't know that, like, this Celtics team is just so good. I don't know that maybe I'm discounting the job that he did. They've been great, plus 10 clean the glass net rating. They've been a really good team. He's done a very good job. They have had to deal with some absences, but not like ridiculous injury, bad luck, or anything else. But I think he's a great coach. I think he's, could be on the ballot, though he isn't for me this year. Ty Lue, the Clippers being fourth in defense, without really having a backup center, like, for a lot of the year, like, that's really, to me, they've been really impressive, and they have a lot of great defensive players, but that's been impressive on that end.
Yeah. I mean, just to navigate like another just half season from Kawhi and stay in it, they very easily could have just been 10 games below 500 when Kawhi came back and they'd just been done.
He's not again on my ballot, but I think Jordy Fernandez did a really good job this year. Like he did such a good job that the Nets aren't going to have the draft pick that at least I thought they were going to, because they already have 25 wins.
Well, they might, but it'll be due to the lottery. They won't have the seed in the lottery.
Correct. Yeah, that's a good way of phrasing it. JP Bickerstaff. I mean, I think that there's
he was my number 3.
So he's not my number 3, but I'm totally fine. I mean, the becoming the first team in NBA history to triple their win total is really impressive, and I think that a big part of their story is improving the overall talent level. But JB Bickerstaff has done a fabulous job getting these players to buy in. It's made a world of difference.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of that, just the internal improvement, I would say as well. Cade's so much better defensively this year. These terrible defending guards are way better.
Well, and Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart. Oh, yeah. I mean, JB Bickerstaff, completely worthy of number 3. The person that I picked, actually, the person I picked number 3 is Ime Udoka. And
it came down to those two for me.
And for Ime Udoka, the argument is the Rockets are making, even if their offense is station to station, and it frustrates me. We did see them beat the Warriors on Sunday before we recorded this. Whether it's by hook or by crook, being able to make that the Rockets have a top 10 offense, they're currently 8th in clean the glass offensive rating, without having, their guys are shooting unsustainably well. No, they've gotten there by basically embracing, in sort of paralleling the late Nick Nurse Raptors, embracing what they are and what they are not. And to have a plus 6.5 net rating and have a top 10 offense with this group is genuinely impressive. And I think he's maximized Alperen Sengun defensively. And that's been a big part of them being 3rd there.
Yeah, it really, again, 3rd place coach of the year. I'm not going to fight over it too much. I do think that Detroit I wouldn't call them a similar level of team to Houston this year. I do think Houston, they're going to be the 2 seed. Part of that is because the West is down a little bit beyond OKC this year, as far as like the competition for the 2nd, 3rd seed, etc. But yeah, I think Houston was basically a neutral net rating team last year, and that doesn't mean he also did a good job last year. That doesn't mean I discount what he did this year. So yeah, he's a totally reasonable choice. I just think to triple your win total, like JB needs some recognition there. We are going to save Defensive Player of the Year for later. What category would you like to do next?
We don't do it until now, so let's do Most Improved Player. And in part because I don't want to do Rookie of the Year. And Most Improved Player, again, murky in terms of definition. The actual definition, I wrote in the criteria years ago into my template, and so I have it, so I'll read it to you. This award is designed to honor an up-and-coming player who has made a dramatic improvement from the previous season or seasons. I have a player who is in Most Improved consideration who is not. I would not consider an up-and-coming player because I add a little bit of my own interpretation to it. But for me, you brought up Cade Cunningham. He's not going to be my number 1, but I think we should talk about Cade Cunningham's Most Improved case because it's certainly striking.
Yeah, I think looking at some of the things that stood out for him, I kind of had, like 6 or 7 finalists. He was one of them. And where he really improved the most, because for me, my personal philosophy here, unless you have like one of the greatest, you go from like not an all-star to a MVP candidate in your 2nd year, which, maybe Victor, if he had played more games, might have been in this category. I do want to talk a little bit about his case, honestly. But I generally avoid 2nd-year players like rookie. It's more just that rookies are like, every rookie is so bad, and it's just you would pick a 2nd-year guy pretty much every year.
The shorthand that I use the shorthand that I
Yeah.
use with it is that a rookie year is not reflective of a player's true talent level because of all the other adjustments that they have to make, coming into the league and the
That's a great way
season
to
and the
put it. Yeah.
travel. And so you can't just measure the delta between year one and year two because year one is not an accurate reflection. And so with Cade Cunningham, this is year three versus year four. His role within the Pistons offense went from 47.5 total creation to 51.7. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it really is when you get up to these higher margins because that's just more time with the ball in your hands. And
Yeah.
Cade
Now
Cunningham,
some of that is because he turned it over more, which I
sure.
don't necessarily want to give him credit for
But
that.
but also Cunningham, like especially once Jaden Ivey went down, they did, get Dennis Schroeder eventually and everything else. But like he had a lot to do and did it very well. The Pistons went from a 110.4 offensive rating filtering at garbage time last year to 116.2. That's a huge improvement. And their overall talent level, I talked about how that's like part of why I picked Ime Udoka over JB Bickerstaff. Like it got better, but it didn't get that much better offensively, in all honesty. Like Cade Cunningham got a lot better. And the other thing that Cade did that we really grew to appreciate over the course of the year is that he really cleaned up what I thought was going to be a pervasive weakness for him, which was in the early years of Cade Cunningham, the Pistons really didn't run very much when he was on the floor. And then this year, they've run more than almost anybody when Cade Cunningham's been on the floor.
No, so this is why I really like his case, because the other thing that I like is just show me the discrete skills that you've really improved. I kind of like that rather than just, he kind of improved across the board incrementally and it added up to something pretty good. So yeah, the running is the number one thing. Way better defensively, doesn't get enough attention, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And then the 3-point shooting, pretty similar. The big thing that stands out in his statistical profile is he's basically traded about 10% of his shots from twos outside of 10 feet and made them floaters. And he also has improved from 40% to 49% from that range.
Mm.
And so that's a part of why he's been able to be a little bit more efficient than he was a year ago. He still actually hasn't improved his finishing that much at the basket. And but so those are the things that stick out to me. What do you, before we move on here, I don't know if you saw JJ Redick was asked about Austin Reeves' chances, and we'll talk about his case here too. But he basically was like, "Oh, this award has just become the guy who's on a max contract, who's drafted in the top 5, who finally breaks out." Is that, I mean, A, is that true? B, is that a reasonable criticism that the spirit of the award should discount such players?
I think it is. I don't think it's Stan Feldman went through it. I think that it's not rigidly true. I mean, especially if you're some of the caveats he put on that are narrow the field in ways that take out some of the winners. But to me, it's not just the quantity of the improvement; it's also the importance of that improvement. And so,
Yeah.
becoming, and I guess this is a natural transition into the guy that I actually have number one, Evan
But
Mobley.
well, here, so I want to build on that point you
Okay,
said, the importance of the improvement. For me, and this is shown in the history of the award too, like Dyson Daniels is someone whose candidacy I considered.
hmm
It's just not important enough. Like he may make the end of an all defense team, pretty bad on offense. Like he's someone who was a bench guy last year and now he's became a starter. And like that sort of improvement, it's like, no, you need to get to the point where you're like at least in the all-star conversation. Now, if no one thought you were that good beforehand or you don't have a pedigree,
yeah.
like, yeah, I'll give you some bonus points
Well, like
for
Ty,
that.
Ty Jerome is interesting because Ty Jerome went from like potentially not being an NBA player to like being an NBA player this
Yeah.
year, and that
But he still is not, he's like the 27th best point guard in the league is where I ranked
exactly.
him,
So
right?
like I think Ty Jerome, it's a great story, and I think that it's if for people who formulate the award differently, maybe that is a persuasive case. For me, it's merits celebrating. And if like we do a version of this during the season that's like most surprising player, I think Ty Jerome is higher on that in some ways for me because it is very surprising, but it is fundamentally different.
All right, so who is your guy then?
My guy is Evan Mobley. And Evan Mobley had never made an All-Star game before now. And I just picked him 5th for MVP. Like
Right.
based on
Yeah.
how I see this award, Mobley, like it's one of the stronger cases in recent vintage. It doesn't seem that way because it's, we talk about, like there was that year where Pascal Siakam like really improved he really upped his usage and his true shooting stayed almost the same and all those sorts of things. Like Evan Mobley, he was a great defensive player before. He's a great defensive player now. But his part within the Cavs offense and his effectiveness as an offensive player is so transformative for the overall level of player. So Mobley, he did ramp up the threes. He's getting close to that vaunted 4 per 36, making 38% of them now. But it really is the overall offense. I mean, 64% true shooting this year, having his total creation is very, very good. Let me pull the actual number so I'm not speaking blind.
Yeah, so he went from 28.5% last year to 31.2%
Like that's huge.
this year. Yeah. I
And
mean,
31
it's not
for his
that
player
big, but
type.
yeah, for his player type it is. I mean, here's the other thing I'll say too, like EPM last year he was negative 0.2 on offense, and this year he's plus 2.4 to go from a negative offensive player. And remember, everyone was whining last year, perhaps even accurately, of like, well, you just can't play him and Jared Allen together. He doesn't take enough threes. He's a center. They got to trade Jared Allen. No one's saying that anymore because Evan Mobley is totally fine now with the offensive responsibilities of power forward. Some of that is shooting the three, 38%, bumped it up to 3.7 per 36. But even more so, it's just been, all right, if you're going to just leave Evan Mobley, he's just going to dribble to the basket and dunk it. You put a smaller player on him, he's going to put the ball on the floor. His handle is improved enough that he could just get to his spot and score very easily at close range if you're not going to respect him. And yeah, I mean, he's not going to post up like another center necessarily, but he also is awesome playing pick and roll in the short. Like he's added so many discrete skills to go from almost an offensive negative, like kind of a disappointment, to like a real plus. And again, yeah, I mean, we're talking about someone who was not an all-star last year to top 5 in MVP, admittedly in kind of a down spot for that, but still, if anyone has him below second team all NBA, they're crazy.
Absolutely. And you mentioned it with EPM. It's also true with Raptor that he was slightly negative last year and then moved up into the +2 range. Like it's really impressive. And it means a lot. It is a huge part of why, Donovan Mitchell is having this successful season. People are talking about that. Darius Garland has actually been a lot better this year than last year, but I don't mention him for most improved because he was so much better 2 years ago than he was last year that it's not a full improvement. That's like that's not to me what the award is about. But the Cavs, if Evan Mobley doesn't take this kind of a leap, the Cavs are a very good team. They are not this team.
Yeah, he's the clear number 1 to me. Who'd you have at number 2?
I have Cade number 2. Because like the way that he has been a tone setter for the Pistons and that's the type of growth. And then my number 3, I mentioned before that there was somebody who it's kind of an unconventional case because the player's so much older, and that's Norm Powell. And Norm Powell, he's been in the league a long time. It is more like he has become a better version of himself, which I usually don't love but he's so much better at that version. I mean, Norm Powell, he went from 22.5% total creation last year as a successful, efficient offensive player to 31.2. Like that is a massive growth in offensive role. There's an increase in playmaking usage and an increase in scoring. So he did it through both of those things. And so like I'm interested in who the other guys that you have are. Like if Wembanyama had played more and all that stuff, maybe I would have put him on the ballot, though I have this aversion to second year players like you do. But I think Norm Powell, like, even though it's so hard to do what he did.
Yeah, I think Reeves is probably my number 2. And
Okay.
he's just up across the board in every category. But the big thing to me is just that he's been a point guard this year. And I didn't think that he necessarily had that in. I thought he was kind of stuck between positions. I thought he wasn't taking enough threes. to really be that great of a threat at the 2, but then he also wasn't an on-ball guy, and he proved that he absolutely could do that. He had some massive scoring games. He upped his three-point attempt rate from 5.8 to 7.6 per 36 minutes. He upped his free throw attempt rate from 3.7 to 5.2, upped his passing creation by 1%. Scoring creation is up by 3%. And his finishing at the rim is really good again this year, although but he's upped his volume there some as well. So and in the impact metrics, he went from 0.8 offensive EPM to 3.1, and also got better defensively. He was negative 0.6 EPM last year and plus 2.7 this year. And then Cade is going to be my third. Talked about him already, but he went from negative 0.5 overall EPM last year to 3.1. Probably, Franz Wagner had such a disjointed season. If he had just continued at the rate that he was before he got hurt, he would certainly have been on this list as well. Same with Jalen Johnson. I'm going to just roll through a few of these other names. I mean, I think Jaren Jackson too, like he wasn't in consideration for all NBA last year. He's had such an odd career in that he's been like the child walking up the stairs holding a yo-yo, and he's been the yo-yo. But he's, whether it's shooting, which is now back up to 38% on pretty darn good volume, whether it's his individual scoring, his defense and rim protection, which isn't as good as it was in the past, but his offense has been way better. Again, this is for him as to be an all-NBA player. Like, I know he's sort of like his numbers in theory aren't up that much, but he wasn't doing that on a real team. He was just shooting every time. Now they're actually a good offense, and he's contributing to that. He actually, you know what? I'm going to move him up to number 3 above Cade.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Jaren Jackson Jr. went from negative 0.1 EPM last year to 4.0.
And I'll mention briefly, the stats for Quentin Grimes in terms of the difference between this year and last year, especially with what he's been doing on the tanktastic Sixers towards the end of the year, not to denigrate some of what he's done. That is a pretty stark difference. However, he had better years. It's a less extreme version of the Darius Garland thing. He had better years for the Knicks than last year. And so comparing his third year to his fourth year is a little bit unfair.
I want to just shout out a few more guys that I think, because I love this category. I want to just make sure I'm at least mentioning some of these guys. Jalen Williams, another guy, was not in All-NBA consideration, didn't make an All-Star team last year. Jalen Duren just got so much better as a rim protector this season. Jaden Ivey was on pace to really, I don't know if he would have been at the top of this list, but he really got a lot better. Ivica Zubac, pretty much the same, I would say, defensively, maybe a little bit better there, but offensively, he was able to be at least a little bit of a floor raiser with that, shooting 97 left shoulder hook shots per game. Denny Avdia did it more during silly season. He had a very disappointing start to the year, lost his starting job, but overall his stats are way up across the board compared and on a Portland team that probably has more offensive talent than his Wizards team did last year. He's managed to get a lot more efficient.
With Avdia, his true shooting improved slightly when his total creation went from 31% to 35%, which that is an important jump, but to stay and actually slightly improve your efficiency with that is very impressive.
Jokic tax aside, Christian Braun went from 55 to 66% true shooting and basically leads the NBA in fast break points, which is pretty remarkable. Like, yes, Jokic has really helped him. He's played obviously more with Jokic now because he starts, and he didn't last year. I talked about Jalen Johnson and his playmaking improvement. It really stood out to me. Jackson Hayes went from unplayable to playable. Congratulations there. Jay Huff only merited 49 minutes last year in Denver and was like a very quality backup center. How did Denver never try him at all last year? I don't
It's an
understand
incredible
that.
question.
Malik Beasley, I felt like he had this in him, but he got so much better defensively, and he upped his three-point attempt rate from 8.3 to 12 for 36 while still hitting 41%. And he upped his scoring creation from 13.5% to 20.6%. Max Christie was only played due to injuries last year, made a nice leap in his career as a 3-and-D guy. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, actually stats ended up more similar to last year than I had recalled because he actually shot it better last year than I thought. He's not as good as Norman Powell, but Nikola Vucevic was probably one of the most damaging players in basketball last year and actually really was a nice offensive force for Chicago. He shot 40% from three all year. It started going down. I was like, he's going to go right back to 4. He shot 29% from three last year. Went from 54% true shooting to 61.5% true shooting.
And he went from being the center on a play-in team to being the center on a play-in team. It's not fair to him, but I just wanted to mention it.
But he's been like a good he was a terrible defensive player and a bad offensive player last year. He soaked up a lot of possessions.
He was the second best center on his own team last year, and then he's been legitimately a positive.
Yeah. Well, we're not getting the most disappointing player yet. You mentioned Grimes. I mean, obviously, what he did in Philly comes with a little bit of a grain of salt, but you still give him some credit for that. Santi Aldama took a big step forward as well. Scottie Pippen Jr. I actually don't think he was that much better this year than last year. But he only played 21 games and was on a two-way towards the end of the year. Like got signed towards the end. Jerome, you mentioned him.
What about Tyler Hero? Like, I think Hero. I didn't have him in my top 3, but I considered him more heavily for the top 3 than I think some of the other guys we've discussed because his role within the Heat offense is larger, but also he's just having this incredibly efficient season. Over 60% true shooting for him.
Yeah, that's gone up quite a bit, and he has gotten much better as a finisher. That's the biggest thing that stands out, going from 58% around the rim to 69%. And actually shot better from 3 last year, but he's upped his 3-point attempt volume. He just has fallen off so much over the last couple of months. Like he would have been probably in consideration for me to win the award if he had just played the way he played through the All-Star break. But since then, he's had a little bit of a renaissance lately, but he's struggled. And then Wembanyama obviously, went from MVP to MVP level, MVP candidate level.
MVP ballot is.
Yes, ballot level. That's a good way to say it as well. And yeah, I mean, he upped his 3-point attempt volume, which I didn't love, but he did it, and also went from 32.5 to 35%, shooting 9.5 threes per 36.
And he turned the ball over too much, but he somehow turned it over less.
Yeah, and also would have been our defensive player of the year if he'd made it through the whole season. Yeah, so that was, I just like shouting those guys out. And hey, Gershon Yabusele, good job. He's a lot better than the last time he was in the NBA. Can we compare to that?
I think of Yabu kind of in the same level of with Ty Jerome, where it's like you established yourself as an NBA player. Like that is fabulous work.
Okay, let's move to our next category here.
Let's do Rookie of the Year. I mean, we kind of have to at some point. And unfortunately, not only is this a weak rookie class, but it was weaker because guys like Jared McCain are ineligible. And my number 1 has, I think, fairly steadily been Jalen Wells, and it continues. Jalen Wells is my pick to win the award. He has been, he's kind of done what the Grizzlies have needed from him. And when you consider this year, like that's pretty high praise. Like he's taken on tough defensive assignments. He has been reasonably efficient relative to everything for himself. And so like Jalen Wells, it's not the strongest Rookie of the Year case, obviously, but like I think it's a completely reasonable one, especially when you factor in everything else.
Yeah, Wells fell off quite a bit in recent weeks with his shooting, and he's pretty much about average at this point. I do think he's a quality defensive option. He's a little bit too thin against some of the bigger guys. But he just is not consequential enough of a player for me, and he was my default pick at times this year, but all these guys have been so frankly inconsequential that it was prime for anybody who could really show some ability as a prospect and also do it on a real team to come in and seize that. And that's actually what Zachary Risacher did to me in the, I mean, it's just had a really nice last couple months of the season. The Hawks have continued to be a real team. They haven't been dominating, obviously. Risacher's overall stats are now respectable over the course of the season. Impact metrics haven't totally loved him, but now he's at 54.7% true shooting, and he is improved. Is now actually over 20% usage, hitting 34.5% of his threes, which again has gone up quite a bit of late. He's had some pretty big games as maybe not the primary guy, but working off the ball, he's been able to convert reasonably well. He's a solid enough defensive guy. He's added some nice skills as the season has gone along as well. Made a lot more of his dunks, a much higher percentage than he did as a prospect in France at this point. So, I mean, I just, like, he had a nice couple of months. Everyone else has just been totally negative. I don't love him as a prospect. I think he's going to be a solid player for a long time. Wells kind of fell off, so all right.
I have no problem. I have Risacher third, and the delineations between them. And Risacher and Wells have actually they're similar efficiencies overall in the season. I think Wells has been the meaningfully better defensive player overall. And you have a tiebreaker, which I don't have, which is kind of the idea of what they could potentially be as players. My number 2 is somebody that wasn't on my ballot at all either. So my number 2 and my number 3 were both players that did not appear on my ballot the last time we did it, which was like a month ago. And my number 2 is Donovan Clingan. And it's like you, I was kind of looking for somebody to do something positive. And with Clingan, it has been the rim protection. And I brought this up, the Blazers defense has been way better over the second half to 2/3 of the season. Clingan's presence has been an important part of that. So he's contesting 34% of opponent shots. They're shooting a preposterously low 49% on those. That is actually lower than opponent shooting on the shots that Victor Wembanyama contested this year, though his contest rate is lower than Wembanyama's was. And the other kind of traditional stuff, teams aren't taking a ton of shots in the restricted area. Clingan's offensive flaws are numerous, including his hands. But it's like, hey, a tangible thing that somebody is doing when they're out there, even if it is standing there and being tall. I put Clingan number 2.
Yeah, and he's been a dominant offensive rebounder as well, if not a dominant putbacker of those offensive rebounds necessarily. And yeah, any of these rookies, frankly, like the Blazers are like a semi-real team, and they are 4.3 points per 100 better when he's on the floor. He wasn't playing that many minutes early. He's only at 19 minutes a game even now, but he actually was starting for them once all their other centers went down. So he was third on my list. I did go to Zach Edey as well. I think Edey with some of the
so you didn't have Wells on your team. You didn't have Wells on your ballot at all?
No, I had him fourth.
Wow.
He's just, I don't know. I'm just skeptical of that 3-and-D skill set. It's like it can just be a little ephemeral.
Yeah, and it's true that you grade this a little differently, but I just think he's been the best rookie so far this year in terms of helping his team win overall.
Yeah, I think Risacher. I mean, I don't know. Like Risacher had he was shooting a lot and not making them and like kind of hurting the team. I would say for part of the year, but I don't know. This is just. I'm not going to put Jalen Wells on my rookie of the year ballot. Like he's just not a consequential enough player. If like these other guys have done enough in this admittedly it's during silly season, but they've done enough statistically in this last bit that I will freely admit that I was looking for an excuse to not have Jalen Wells on my ballot because, and he also like his struggles have knocked him down as well. If he's shooting 40% from 3 like he was, or high 30s earlier in the season, I might feel better about it as well. Yeah, I mean, Kelly Ware also did play a nice role for the Heat. He started for them. He was reasonably adequate, he would have been in consideration here. And Stephon Castle, of course, I mean, every single time we've done this, we've had to explain why we don't have him. I'm kind of sick of that. He's just one of the worst offensive players in basketball with the amount that he shoots and how inefficient he is, and then how much he kills your team by also not making any shots, or you can put your center on him, or I think he's got a nice future, but I think he's just been just too damaging of an offensive
he's
player.
on my second team all rookie. I'll mention that.
Oh yeah, did you do that?
I did.
I always forget that every year.
But I will say because I believe that all rookie does not have games played requirements. Jared McCain made my first team all rookie because I'm like, damn it, he's been the best rookie. He makes it. That's just the way I did it. I'll just run through it briefly.
Please.
So the top 3 guys that had for rookie of the year: Jalen Wells, Klingon, and Risa Shea. They're all on there, of course. McCain, and then Zach Edey. I think that, to me, like, Edey deserves at least this being there. Khalil Ware being number 6. Then to me, the other guys that kind of just deserve it, in part because they had consistent roles, but also because they did reasonably well. Ryan Dunn, Stephon Castle. Then the last 2 got a little bit shaky for me. Dalton Connect, I think, was the cleanest argument for that 9th spot. And then the last one, I would have given it to AJ Mitchell if he had played more. But unlike McCain, he wasn't quite as good when he played. I considered Ron Holland. I considered Oso Ighodaro, who's had some intriguing stuff with the Suns this year. But I actually ended up giving it to, and this might just be me being stupid, to Quentin Post. Because Quentin Post, like, he's actually playing a positive role. Like, he has these flaws defensively, but he's been better. And there aren't that many rookies who have actually been a part of successful basketball this year. And AJ Mitchell would have been that guy, but he just hasn't played in too long.
I fucking hate all rookie second team.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's like, it always sucks. It's like,
Yeah.
I have this criteria with rookie of the year where I give it to the better prospect, and it ends up becoming that. Like, Alex Sarr will surely make one of the 2 teams. Would I put him on there? I think Alex Sarr is a pretty good prospect. He had a terribly damaging season from a statistical standpoint. For the first half, he actually has been totally fine in the second half. But he was, like, basically the least efficient season a center ever had for the first.
Apologies. Another guy I considered that I forgot to mention is Modest Buzelis. He's had a nice closing kick too. And
it's just it's like basically everything you struggle with for 6th man, but it's like you're doing it for 11th man.
Especially this year.
All right, well, now that we've teased 6th man, let's move there.
Well, let's do best sophomore quickly.
Oh yeah, okay. There's not much to go on here. Yeah, that's a category for us. But
it's a category we invented, but it's nice to track it. And we do not have a games played requirement here, in part because that would have made the list more depressing. For me, this is relatively clean. Victor Wembanyama, number 1. Chet Holmgren, number 2. Amen Thompson, number 3. I want to give a couple shout outs, though. Amen's twin brother Asar has had a nice year. Derek Lively II, if he had played more and played a little bit better, he could have gotten it over Amen. And then Tamani Kamara has had a very nice year, and I wanted to make sure we mentioned him.
Yeah, Scoot is someone I want to give a little bit of a shout out to as well. I would have had Amen number 2 just because I think he played so much more than Chet, even though obviously I think Chet's better than him. Let's move to 6th man now.
And 6th man, it seems like it's always, like, in most years it's a little bit more complicated because you don't have those traditional, like, guy who comes off the bench but closes and has this really important role. Like, there aren't that many of those each year. But so my number 1 is still Peyton Pritchard. He's just having this ridiculous shooting season, and we talked about it a little bit in point guard rankings. Like, even if I don't think it's predictive that he's going to shoot 41% on over 10 threes per 36 forever, he is doing it right now. I give credit there, but I wanted to talk more, and we can talk about Peyton Pritchard, about the guy that I have second, who actually I think does come close to the traditional argument, not because he's good on defense, which some of the guys that we love the most have been, but that's Malik Beasley. Because there's an argument that Malik Beasley has been the second best Piston, and he does come off the bench.
And he closes a lot for them too. He's played a lot of minutes, second most of these. Oh no, I'm sorry, most of our candidates. Pritchard is number 2. Averages second most minutes per game. Oh no, I guess Russell Westbrook, if you want to call him a candidate, is at 28.2. But Westbrook almost has actually no, he is currently ineligible. He
Yeah,
may
he has
be
started enough
eligible
games
by
for
the
now.
end. Yeah, actually, this is I'm not sure if this was compiled after the Pacer game, but in any event, he's not going to figure it because he's not good enough. Yeah, like those two certainly both have the best traditional cases. I think Pritchard is a little bit better on defense. He can switch a little bit more, fit into that Celtics system, do a little bit more on the ball than Beasley. He's more efficient overall at 63.4% true shooting versus Beasley's 59%. Even if I do think Beasley has a little bit more off ball gravity than he does. And Ty Jerome is someone who is also going to get a lot of pub for this award. He's number 1. I don't think he's the best candidate on his own team. Number 2, he's played 1,300 minutes and he never closes. He hasn't even averaged 20 minutes a game. Yeah, he's behind 2 all NBA players, but I'm sorry, like he just hasn't contributed enough. And he also isn't really a positive on defense. I'd say he's the worst defender relative to even Beasley or, well, I don't know. He'll do stuff as a team defender, but he's a traffic cone. Yeah, I mean, Pritchard and Beasley figured very seriously for you. Who else did, or for me at least, who else did you have in this mix?
So yeah, I think there are a lot of guys who are having good years. Want to shout out Tari Eason. Karis LeVert had a really strong case, then is toned down a little bit once he got traded to the Hawks. There was one point in the year where like Dante DiVincenzo either was going to like win the award for me or wasn't going to qualify because of like he had basically kind of taken the starting role. Ended up kind of not doing either one of those. But the two guys that I seriously considered for the last spot, most seriously considered, are DeAndre Hunter and Scottie Pippen Jr. So the case for DeAndre Hunter is it's kind of like he's been very effective shooting the ball, 63% true shooting in part because he's making 41% of his threes, taking 8 per 36. That's really really good. And Hunter was a part of a lot of the best lineups for the Hawks because he outplayed Zachary Risachet when they were on the same team. And then Risachet has been better since then. And also Hunter's been on a different team. But I ended up picking Scottie Pippen Jr. Maybe it's because you've been in my ear so much over the course of this year. But Scottie Pippen Jr. has had this really good season. He's, of course, a very talented defensive player relative to his position. And even though he doesn't lead the Grizzlies to unbelievable offense, like they have a 111 offensive rating when he's on the floor, they've done reasonably well. He's been effective in terms of his individual offense, and like he does what's asked of him. And like so, I went with Pippen over Hunter for the last spot.
Yeah, certainly. Pippen had fallen off a little bit. Now he's back, actually, even closing some games. Above average true shooting out of the point guard spot. Really, his only weakness is that he turns it over a ton. He's a above average passer in terms of his passing creation at the point guard position, and I think he's one of the best defenders there too, both on and off the ball. 2.3 steals for 36 for Pippen, so he's right in there for me. DiVincenzo has played about as many minutes as the rest of these guys. If he could have just put together a little bit more of that run that he was on before he got hurt, and then like he just had a really tough first couple of months of the season. I want to shout out a few other guys who I think are pretty interesting in this. I think you hit all of my like really serious candidates. Santi Aldama coming off the bench, just able to provide a little bit of everything from that forward spot, although his defense is not great. Miles McBride, just a stalwart off the bench, but just a little bit too inefficient for the Knicks. Grimes, if he had done what he did in Philly on a real team, I would have been pretty into that. We'll see how much he plays the rest of the way for Philly. He started 47% of the game, so he is eligible. Scoot Henderson, too, very solid backup point guard play at this point in time. Blazers are actually a lot better when he's on the floor. A few guys too.
Isaiah Joe, I wanted to make
sure.
Oh,
yeah, speaking of good when he's on the floor.
Yeah, Isaiah Joe. Yeah, what is his net rating right now? It's plus like 10.7.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good. And
41%.
No, that is incorrect. He is his net rating when he's on the floor is plus 15.9.
Oh, you're right. I was looking at the differential. You're right.
Yeah. So no, that's pretty incredible. Still less than Shea and Alex Caruso, Aaron Wiggins, like those good bench guys too. Just none of those guys have played enough. Caruso hasn't even played 1,000 minutes yet. But obviously still like Caruso still, even he started to shoot the ball better, having one of his better finishing seasons in recent vintage. If he just played more, he might have even still been my pick. And Steven Adams, maybe the best backup center. He and Isaiah Stewart are the two that would probably be on that list for me. Adams just has only played 760 minutes, so that's the only problem. Only plays 13.6 minutes a game, but they've kind of, I think, preserved him towards the end, and then he started playing really well, and now he's been a huge part of how they've won 15 out of 17 here to seize the 2 seed. Nick Batum, always useful as well. Another guy just doesn't quite play enough, although he's played 76 games in the end. So yeah, I think it really. I'll go Pritchard 1, Beasley 2. That's pretty clear to me. And then I think I'll give it to DeAndre Hunter. I think he's just a little bit more important of a player than Scottie Pippen Jr.
Me having Pippen and you having Hunter feels so weird to me. But again, they were very close. It's like you pulled the chair on me. But for third team.
Hunter's been, I mean, I think Hunter moving over to Cleveland and continuing to really contribute there was a big thing for me. Okay, what is next here? We probably got to go executives
of the year.
Yeah, that's right.
I said when the trade happened that Rob Pelinka would be my number 1. Rob Pelinka is still my number 1. You trade for Luka Doncic, you give up what they gave up. You get number 1. Congratulations. That doesn't mean I think he's the best GM. I do not think he's the best GM at all. But when you do that one trade, that's all you need.
Well, he's done some other nice things too that I think we should give some credit to. He's successfully navigated screwing himself over with all these player options this year,
and didn't give out more of them. I don't think.
Now, he totally fucked the dog on the Mark Williams thing. I think they made the right decision in rescinding the trade, but they made the wrong decision in making the trade to begin with, and then also putting themselves in a position where they just couldn't have any kind of a backup plan. More importantly, though, I would say they got Dorian Finney-Smith, and they didn't have to give up a first to do it. Like, he's been a monster for them. Like, he really has been probably as much of a key to their season as Luka. Like, I really am not sure how much better they got, honestly, in the Luka trade for this year. Given that they had to give up Max Christie, who was really helping them a lot, and AD was playing really well too. Now AD ended up getting injured. Like, obviously you make the trade, but I think like they were playing pretty darn well. They already had Reeves. Like, adding Luka wasn't necessarily as much of a but they just had nobody like Finney-Smith at all, and he's shot the ball exceedingly well. And also they were in competition for him, right? Like Memphis was in on that. They managed to outmaneuver Memphis and still didn't have to give up one of their precious firsts. That was really well done. Sam Presti is my number 2. Added Alex Caruso in a great trade for Josh Giddey, who wasn't going to be part of their plans. Getting Hartenstein as well. I mean, this is one of the greatest regular season teams of all time, and I really appreciated his level of aggression. I think he learned from his mistakes the last time he did this, where he kind of went the patient approach and actually subtracted talent in the end with the Harden trade. He did really well, and they still have every bit as large of a war chest in terms of picks. Like they still, for all the picks that they have, they've traded some picks around and gotten other picks back, but they still have not. They've built this team without having to trade a single pick for a player. That's
I
incredible.
mean, that is simultaneously both impressive and also in part the reason why I have Presti third and not second is because I think they missed an opportunity to get better and that they rested on their laurels. And I think it,
They have the best net rating of all time.
but if they don't win the championship this year and they're
That's
weak,
true.
their weakness at some of these spots, I'm not saying they're going to lose.
It's a very long breakfast that they're having, Danny, that they have to finish. It's a full English brekkie that they're having.
And so the person who I have over it, and we've disagreed on this a lot over the year, is Kobe Altman. And to me, one of the most important things that a general manager can do, an executive, is choose what to do on their coach. And JB Bickerstaff, we just talked about him as being a potential coach of the year candidate. He did a very good job overall with the Cleveland Cavaliers. They made the right decision moving on. They made the right decision in Kenny Atkinson. That is a very tough rope to walk. It is something Sam Presti didn't have to do because he already had the right coach, but that doesn't matter because Kobe Altman had to do it and did it. And Kenny Atkinson,
he strengthened his case with the Hunter move too. I think
yes.
that's what convinced me to have him on my list last time because I felt like there weren't quite enough changes.
Yeah,
and also there just weren't other great candidates either.
There aren't, and we'll talk through some of the other ones briefly. But Altman, to me, and keeping their group together, even if that, like Evan Mobley's improvement made that look more palatable now, but there was plenty of clamor beforehand to potentially move one or more, and believing in Darius Garland, he's had this huge bounce back year. So for me, it was a relatively clean top three. I like a lot of what Sean Marks did. I thought he sold high on Mikal Bridges, got those 5 first-round picks. We'll see how good those first-round picks end up being. Also hired a very good coach in Jordi Fernandez. So good a coach that maybe their draft pick will be slightly worse for it. So I wanted to mention him. Trajan Langdon hired the right coach. JB Bickerstaff is important there and continued to improve their talent level, bringing in Malik Beasley, bringing in just the overall, even though I hated the Tobias Harris signing, just bringing in overall talent. But the reason why Langdon...
Do you think they're in position now with their cap space to sign Quentin Grimes as a restricted free agent this offseason?
It would be unbelievably funny if they did. They could use him.
He would actually be a pretty good.
Well, but the part of the reason for me why Langdon wasn't like he doesn't have a case to really push the top 3, in part was they had more resources. Like this is a team that had a ton of cap space, and that also did at times a poor job negotiating with the teams that they were negotiating with. Like, for example, they did the Mavericks a huge favor in the Tim Hardaway Jr. trade. Did not get
I mean, how are you going to out negotiate Nico Harrison? That's not realistic.
I mean, you could just know him for a little while, apparently. But I mean, but Trajan Langdon did a very good job, and so I want to acknowledge that.
Sure.
2 others that I think that they don't have top 3 cases, but I wanted to mention. One of them is Lawrence Frank, in part because the Paul George decision nonsense that I was so incredulous about when it happened looks better now. Like the idea that that contract might not have aged well, and there's a whole bunch of weirdness there. But also, the response to losing Paul George, they brought in a bunch of competent, defense players like Derek Jones Jr. and all this stuff, and they were successful this year. They're going to make at least the play-in, potentially the playoffs, with Kawhi playing half the year. Like he's done a very good job.
Yeah, and I mean his trade deadline was pretty wizardrous. I thought Bogdanovich has been helping them. I would say they kind of bought low on him. And to get off of that Terrence Mann contract was fantastic. They got paid in that deal too, in terms of picks, which was remarkable. Ben Simmons has even been doing a little something for him as in the buyout market.
And then the other guy I think we have to mention is Mike Dunleavy. And Dunleavy, there was a point early in the season where it looked like his offseason signings were going well. Buddy Hield wasn't missing a 3. Kyle Anderson was a part of the rotation. That ended up going more poorly overall. But even though I think that the Jimmy Butler trade is a sugar high and it will eventually have a downside, and they had the extension that they gave him will have a lot of downside on it. It definitely made them a significantly better team. The asset price wasn't that high. Like I think that Dunleavy, like his case, it's different because things didn't work out the way we expected. But I mean, they still improved a lot over the course of the season and arguably the offseason.
I think they made the right decision on Klay Thompson, and I
Yeah.
think, yeah, the Jimmy move. Perhaps we're prisoners of the moment, and we'll find out that the Warriors are going to lose 4-1 in the first round. But clearly, to resurrect this group that was looking pretty moribund and was basically at 500 at the point of the trade, and they've just been fantastic since then. Like he has did a great job there again. Like they're gonna have to pay the piper later, but also you can make moves like that when you have 37-year-old Steph Curry. Like it's been way better in the short term than I thought. If you had told me that it would have been this good even right now, I would have said, yeah, go ahead and make the move. And they also only gave up one future first. They still have plenty of things that they can move. Not extending Jonathan Kuminga, that looks like a pretty smart move as well. And yeah, it hasn't been perfect for him because the Schroeder trade was like kind of a failure. And but I still think he would get my number 3 right now. You want to laugh at something, Danny?
Sure.
We at times this year, part of the case for Zach Kleiman was that he brought in these assistants to run this new offense.
I mean, the other argument in favor of Zach Kleiman was what they did in the draft. I mean, they got 2 of the top 4 rookies on my
Yeah.
ballot with a late lottery pick that they didn't have to move up to get somebody, and a second round pick. Like that's impressive. But Kleiman, I mean, all of the other things, including what they did at the deadline and what they didn't do at the deadline, where they used assets to get worse, despite and it may end up costing them a playoff spot. Like that's and I mean, of course, all the nonsense with Taylor Jenkins.
So you mentioned Brooklyn, and I think we got to, for Sean Marks, we got to give them credit for the Mikal Bridges trade to get 5 first-round picks. Like he did a great job of selling high there. Now, he also made this trade with Houston. I understand why the Nets did that. They needed the optionality. I thought that was a fair trade at the time. But holy shit, does that look good for Rafael Stone in Houston right now. I realize that Houston, I mean, they drafted Reed Shepard. I think that was the right pick. I still would have Reed Shepard pretty darn high in a redraft. That'd be a fun thing to do some rainy day that we never seem to have here. Because there's always something that we like have to do, even though we record 250 episodes a year. But in any event, I think the Jalen Green extension was good. Şengün was one that Dan and I thought is looking like one of the best contracts going forward. To get him for less than the max was really solid. I think Green is certainly, at minimum, a totally tradable asset going forward, and he also has contributed this season as well. And by doing those extensions, they now have the option to just bring back Fred VanVleet on his current salary if they want to. That will actually give them some leverage to probably get him on a better deal going forward as well. They didn't do anything in free agency, but they didn't need to. But to just hear the picks that they have now in the kitty, it's insane. First of all, they got this Phoenix pick for this year that they're going to be able to swap for. Then they got the 2027 Phoenix first. They held on to Brooklyn's swap rights in 27. And then in 29, they have both Phoenix and Dallas from the Nets. And they got...
But Dallas has Luka. They're not going to be bad. Sorry,
that's looking like a pretty unbelievable war chest, especially when you consider the talent that's also on the roster that they could trade. Like they basically, I think they can outbid anybody at this point for any any player that
Well,
realistically could
and the
become
thing that
available.
the thing that the Rockets have that the Thunder don't, as deep as the Thunder asset base is they have things that have real upside. Like the Thunder have this volume, but they don't have a ton of picks that are really juicy where teams could be like, but I mean, if you imagine Rafael Stone talking to teams this summer, being like, hey, we have Phoenix and Dallas's first round picks unprotected in 2029. Teams are going to be very excited about that. I don't know if we'll have that's another rainy day
Yeah.
podcast that I love doing.
Yeah, even you know who'd be really excited about that is the Suns. They would love to get Phoenix's unprotected 2029 pick.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, but that's another pod that we've done before of the owed asset rankings and like
That'll be a fun. Yeah, we didn't do that this year actually. That would be a fun one to do at some point.
Hopefully. And so yeah, Houston, Rafael Stone, and he didn't have to hire a coach this year because he made the right signing last year. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy you mentioned it.
Not executive of the year, Nico Harrison. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Go directly to the first place ranking in this, and we don't need to discuss it any further.
Nope, we don't have to. We can, but we don't have to. Instead, I want to talk about a couple of the cases that I think have been underappreciated in this, and because like we talk about this all the time. It's an award that you and I truly enjoy discussing.
Yeah, I don't know if you said underappreciated cases. I don't think these guys want you as their lawyer. They're probably looking around like who hired this guy for me?
Oh no, I am not their advocate
what is this hourly rate here?
But so the person who I was working through, because there are a lot of good candidates this year for not executive of the year, is someone that I realized has a really good kind of strong traditional case is James Jones, where James Jones.
I use my number 3.
Yeah, he might be mine too. I have to really think about it. There are some candidates I want to discuss.
The process behind trading their 31 pick for those 3 shitty picks from Utah was atrocious.
And the Suns being mostly healthy this year and still being as impressively shitty as they've been is like it's you don't want to have results dictate something like this, but at a certain point it is an indication. And part of that was like, you know, they had these defensive flaws. They didn't use many resources. They're 4th from the bottom in defense this year. That's a big part of, I mean, they're also worse on offense than you'd hope. But even if you and I thought he was the right hire, it doesn't seem like the Mike Budenholzer era is going particularly well. And so like, and the Suns, they got more from some of their minimum guys than other teams did, but they didn't get enough from their minimum guys. So yeah.
Yeah. And then they also managed to try, but failed to move KD. Pissing him off
which is the reason why James Jones kind of he ends up being my 3rd over some other people, because he somehow managed to burn a bridge with a non-move, which is incredible. The piece on that, by the way, is amazing. So Daryl Morey, it's the flavor of I supported the moves, but they worked out very poorly. Where they brought in Paul George, had this rough year. Caleb Martin didn't work out nearly as well as I'd hoped and expected. But the other reason why Morey doesn't get on my list, one is that I supported most of the moves, even though they didn't work out. The other is like getting Quentin Grimes in a rebound for the Caleb Martin deal. Like that looks like it's going to work out.
Getting Jared McCain, who would have easily been rookie of the year. I would imagine if he'd stayed healthy. And
again, they didn't draft him number 1 or anything like that. So Morey, to me, we need to mention him, but you have that. Then you have the
we do have to mention too the Embiid extension.
Oh,
I mean, that is
like in terms of damage to the franchise, in terms of like long-term stuff, you could argue that Morey is number 2 just in terms of how this stuff could go poorly.
Yeah, I don't know. I my feeling was maybe that's not going to hurt them that much anyway. But Morey, it's kind of funny because Morey is like a good enough GM that, like, you know, they got Tyrese Maxey, they got these picks. They just stole Quentin Grimes. Like, they have some decent young players. You know, he got Yabi Saley out. Not that he's part of the foundation, but that was a nice move. Yeah, he's not in my top 3. I think I got to stick with Arturas here at number 2.
Same.
Even if it's been like, I think Buzelis was kind of an obvious pick there, but also a good one. Like, he's a much better prospect than a lot of guys who went ahead of him in this draft. That's for sure. But the process behind the Caruso deal was not great. And Josh Giddey, yes, during silly season, he's putting up some triple doubles. He's still not really a guy he's gonna end up one of these quagmire players. I would imagine
You know
could have
who's
gotten
not?
way more for Caruso. That would have helped more of a rebuild. They could have just kept their top 10 pick easily, not had to trade something to get the unprotected or the protected portion of that back. I guess the
Yeah,
unprotected portion of
and
it
that
back.
being the primary return in a Zach LaVine trade is egregious. Like
Yeah.
Zach
Well, I mean,
LaVine,
Zach LaVine is overpaid for sure. I mean, they made the
but
move
he's a
for him,
good
but yeah,
player. I mean, like the fact that that's what they got for him was something that they
yeah.
shouldn't have needed anyway.
I mean,
It's
I would have just like, because the thing about getting their own pick back is like they control that, right? Like they control whether it goes or not. So why wouldn't you actually just get something else from San Antonio instead? Like the fact that he allowed his own and ownership's dreams of chasing the 11th seed in the lottery and the 10th seed in the play-in to and they benefited so much from just like Toronto being
Philly.
ridiculous this year, and Philly, and like the fact that they're like quote unquote competing for something right now is ridiculous. And it's also like, to me at this point, I don't think you deserve any credit for winning 35 games, because it's so like you can win 35 games even with like totally terrible talent just by not tanking. Like that's
Yeah,
what they've
you can
done. That's why,
you can be a
because
sub
everyone
five.
else is tanking.
Yeah, you can be a sub 500 team during the competitive portion, and then you can win more games in silly season because you're trying more than those teams are, and you can get to that sort of level. And the other thing that's an arrow in Arturas's quiver, which we didn't expect, was, they paid Patrick Williams what looked like reasonable money at the time.
No, that was unreasonable money. And then there was we completely forgot that like they fucked the dog in the DeRozan trade and
The
didn't get
Harrison
any
Barnes,
assets there.
yeah,
And they chose Jalen Smith and Patrick Williams over getting, like, should have just taken back Harrison Barnes and then also gotten the asset from the Kings. Uh, yeah, few others I could throw out there. And there's a lot of these at this point. I mean, Masai Ujiri,
yep.
certainly just pretty directionless at this point. David Griffin, the Murray trade was a disaster even before he went down with the torn Achilles. And the Ingram situation, I think, kind of hung over this franchise in a negative way. And of course, the injuries hit as well. But it was clear that even had guys not gotten injured, they were going to disappoint this year. I think the Ingram situation was a big part of that. Jeff Weltman not knowing what that line that's 23 feet 9 inches from the basket is for. Leon Rose, they gave up a lot. They made their move. I understand why they did it. Bridges is disappointed. Karl-Anthony Towns has been everything you could have expected, but you also should have known that one of the things you could expect is that your defense is just never going to be that good with him. Would they have been better and their hand was forced by OKC having the cap space for Hartenstein and only being able to pay him $16 million because of the early bird rights? Like, that was a problem. And he also got Brunson to agree to this great extension. Also had to pay OG Anunoby over $40 million a year. But Philly probably would have poached him had it not been for that. So, and then Tim Connolly too. Like did trading away Karl-Anthony Towns, did that really hurt Minnesota? A lot of these questions are still out there, but some of these, maybe that's going to be a deal that doesn't help either team. That Towns Randall deal.
Monty McNair, I just want to mention briefly. I mean, the Mike Brown thing is a part of this, but I mean, DeMar DeRozan, they gave up this pick swap right with the Spurs.
Wait, who is Monty McNair? Isn't Jeremy Lamb their GM?
Depends on the moment.
Yeah, I mean that's like maybe the most hilarious part of that article. And of course, Vivek is the one overseeing all of this, and he truly deserves the blame. because I don't think there's an executive who's going to ever succeeded in managing up with Vivek Ranadive. The most ridiculous part of that article was, oh yeah, Jeremy Lamb has really had a huge influence on it, but and then like 3 weeks later, like, but he's not believed to have any influence. And I was like, oh, did he break up with Angeli? Is that what happened?
Well, isn't the rumor that he might have?
Like, isn't it? I don't know. I don't know what the rumor is. I don't even care. But the fact that not only are we going to listen to this guy, but our process is such that we're only going to listen to him for as long as he's dating my daughter, and that he, or like something happened like after that where maybe he's still dating her, but we're not going to listen to him anymore. It's just so utterly whimsical. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, let's not forget pissing off their best player, De'Aaron Fox, by firing the coach and then never explaining it.
And putting it on his
I do
shoulders.
kind of appreciate Monty McNair just refusing to have that press. I mean, I would imagine what happened was that they're like, okay, Monty, you go explain this. He's like, well, I didn't want to do this, so I'm not going to take the blame for it. Sorry. And then he finally had to, because he had to get in front of the media at the trade deadline, and they finally asked him about it 2 months after he got fired.
Amazing.
Okay, let's finish out some of our categories here. For the record, my not executive of the year: Nico Harrison number 1, Arturas number 2, James Jones number 3.
Same.
And yours?
Same. We usually don't agree
Same.
on this, but we did.
Oh, one more thing on Jones. Signing Grayson Allen and Josh Okogie is like, oh yeah, we're gonna just spend because we'll use these guys matching salary. Sign those guys to those contracts when you can't aggregate them together.
Yes.
Like, yeah, it would have made all the sense in the world. Yeah, we can aggregate these guys together and go get Jimmy Butler. Whoops. So you just like spent you lit $100 million of your owner's money on fire
to gain no flexibility, and then they
they
did end up getting Nick Richards for Josh Okogie, which helped them. But
I guess, I mean, would they have had no other matching salary for him? Maybe that's true.
It would have been difficult.
I guess, yeah, he makes $5 million though, Nick Richards. They couldn't have figured that out. I guess if you can't aggregate, I don't know. I don't think Nick Richards was exactly a panacea of a move either, even though I was someone to figure that out at the time. Okay, let's do our most disappointing players. Joel Embiid just has to be number 1 for me.
Yeah.
I know that he has been hurt, and that sucks. But especially when you consider the like being late for stuff, I didn't get the impression that he is totally attacked his rehab. He hasn't been on the same page with the organization. When he was out there, he was really bad. And so he's going to have this other surgery now. We talked about that? Yeah, we did, right?
You and I have not talked about that.
Yeah, I guess I feel a little bit better that he's having the surgery, that they at least in theory found something.
I don't feel worse.
Maybe it's at the point like they've at least found something to try to do now. I guess you could say maybe the surgery just didn't go that well the first time, or maybe he's developed something else. Maybe they probably tried to rehab it, and then they're just going to go in. And sometimes you can't even see that much in the MRI. Maybe they're just going to go in and see if they can find something that's causing all this swelling and bothering him. I'm guessing what they're going to find is he doesn't have much meniscus left, but the fact that, I mean, it's going to just be kind of like a cleanup, like debridement type of thing with the timeline that was given. Paul George was healthier, did suffer through injuries, but I mean, just he's been at the way he actually played was, he like seemed like a first percentile type of outcome.
Yeah, he's definitely disappointing. My number 2 though is DeJounte Murray, and this is not the injury. I mean, the injury is sad, and the Achilles, we don't know what DeJounte Murray is going to be. It's that he missed the start of the year due to a different injury, and then came back and was, during the time DeJounte Murray played, was one of the absolute worst players in the NBA. 49% true shooting, had the ball a ton, was a part of why it looked like the Pelicans might right the ship, and then it became very clear that there was no righting that ship. And so, like Embiid, for me, he's on here more because of, or at least as much because of when he was on the floor versus him missing the time, because I try not to include injuries that much in most disappointing.
Yep. DeJounte was my number 3. I'll roll a few of the other people I considered. Jonathan Kuminga, just to be this inefficient, is certainly disappointing. I know he's been hurt, but even before that, he'll tantalize and then he would kind of regress. Jaime Jaquez was someone who was in the Rookie of the Year conversation last year, just hasn't figured at all this season. Reed Shepherd has to be considered a disappointment. He was number 1 on my board. I was so excited by him in Summer League, and he just to not even be in the rotation at all. And when he did play, was just couldn't hit shots. I mean, I think he's a good shooter. I think he has a good future still, but this season is as disappointing as I could possibly have expected from him. Bradley Beal. Yeah, let me finish up here. Bradley Beal. And, I actually got a lot of guys here. Let me expand this cell. Let's get to it here. Bradley Beal, Devin Booker. I think they're two of the bigger blame guys in Phoenix. Booker just was not at the level that we thought. I mean, that's as much as I want to blame everyone else. I think like if Devin Booker was the Devin Booker that he'd been the last couple of years, I think things still would have been respectable in Phoenix. And there's no real reason that you could think of for this to be the case for him. Let's see here. Who else did we have? Kyle Kuzma. Maybe I just shouldn't have been disappointed at this point. Mikal Bridges just didn't play like a guy who's worth trading 5 first-round picks for. KCP didn't play like a guy who got $66 million guaranteed over 3 years. Wendell Carter Jr. played like a guy who shot 21% from 3. Andre Drummond was supposed to be one of the best backup centers, barely contributed at all. Scotty Barnes, I think, he's had a few injury ups and downs, but totally inefficient this year. And just the Toronto, I thought they could have like a reasonable season, just wasn't the case. Lauri Markkanen has struggled a lot with injuries, but just way down statistically.
I'll talk Markkanen in a second. I'll wait. I'll let you go through your list, but he's my number 3, and I'll explain why.
Yeah. Well, and then the Clippers version of Kevin Porter Jr.
Oh my God. Clippers version of Kevin Porter Jr. might have been the most damaging player in the league this year. But Markkanen, briefly. Some of this is, he's playing on a not serious team. So how much do you want to, but I mean, it's not like the Jazz were that much more serious last year. Markkanen went from making about 58% of his twos down to 52%. And he's also really had trouble. 56 to 52 is probably more accurate. Markkanen also, not making his threes this year. So the drop in true shooting from 63%, where he'd been for the last kind of 2 years, down to 57. That's a huge difference as a player. And with Markkanen, like it's very possible that this is that it is just like the anomaly and this team is so weird, but it's also like he could have been better and they would have been just as bad. So it's hard for me to kind of see it all that way. A couple others that you didn't mention, Jaylen Brown had a really like rough offensive year. We didn't talk about in the NBA at all.
That's a good one, coming off a great playoffs.
Ja Morant, I mean, just overall, I mean, we hoped for a real bounce back year. He hasn't bounced quite enough back. Alperen Şengün's individual efficiency. I mean, he's been a part of, I'm not saying him overall because I think that there's been a lot there. Tyrese Maxey, I mean, just not being able to elevate the Sixers. Caleb Martin, Jeremy Grant, Yusuf Nurkic, Jabari Smith Jr. for me. Like, and some of this is like Jabari Smith, it's relative to my expectations. Like, I thought he was going to have more of a year, especially remember how last year ended, the 23-24 season, where he's basically playing center and then things are going so well. And now he's a little bit more on the periphery. So relative to my expectations.
Yeah, I wouldn't put Jabari on that list. I think he hasn't shot well, but that's I think everything else has been good.
One more to mention, Klay Thompson.
Yeah, like he basically is, if you look at his stats, like he's pretty much what should have been expected.
I mean, the defensive limitations have been a part of it for me.
I mean, I don't know. I guess I just had all that priced in already.
Mm-hmm.
Biggest surprise player, Kevin Porter Jr. Bucks version. Here, I'll throw it through it for real. Mobley is anytime you're in most improved, you gotta be on there. So I mean, a bunch of Cavs: Mobley, Darius Garland, Ty Jerome. Want to give a shout out to Al Horford just to continue to do this and to stay healthy all year at his age. It is amazing. Vucevic, I talked about some of his case a little bit. Dyson Daniels, yeah, I'd say when you average 3 steals a game for the first time in 40 years or whatever it is, that probably qualifies as a surprise. You made the case for Norm Powell already. You also made the case for Quentin Post to be a rotation player on a good team and have it like his ascension in the rotation actually really helping them. I got a few more, but I'll cede the floor to you for a moment.
2 guys that haven't been mentioned at all in this podcast that I wanted to single out. Lonzo Ball being able to play at
that's a great one. Yeah,
being able to play like when he's been available at like a legit NBA rotation level. And then one of my other real heartwarming ones is Ochai Agbaji, who I really liked at the beginning of his career, and then he just had this disaster of a second. Was that his? No, it was his third year.
Yeah, second year. He's in his third year now.
Second year, where it's just like nothing went right, and it's like maybe this guy's not even an NBA player. And then oh no, he is. He's and he's been better this year than he was his rookie year. That's been really really heartwarming.
Yeah, he's figure out a way to make some shots again. Again, like what the hell is this situation in Toronto? What are these players, and like are they actually going to try next year? But he at least is back to showing some promise. Toumani Camara being an all-defense candidate, I know he showed some flashes as a rookie last year, but to really contribute to winning basketball, he's taken a step forward offensively as a shooter and a closeout guy, team defender as well. Malik Beasley, talked about him some already. Steven Adams, after I wasn't even sure he was going to be effective at all this year, and he's been really solid. Dorian Finney-Smith really getting his shooting back to where it was in Dallas and still a quality contributor on defense is certainly deserves to be on this list. Jordan Poole was a complete fucking joke last year, and he had started to show some signs by the end of last season under Brian Keefe, but he's actually come back to not being one of the worst contracts in basketball, which is, I'm not going to call it heartwarming, but at least he wasn't just showing up nightly as a total disaster. I mean, that was the thing about it. Like, it wasn't only that his stats were terrible. Like, he was just making these ridiculous plays for the first half of last year, and at least he's moved beyond that.
A couple other quick ones. Jay Huff coming out of basically nowhere and being a legit rotation player. Jaden Ivey with the Pistons lost a little bit because of his broken leg, but he was a very better version of the player than he had been previously. And Tyler Hero, we talked about him a little bit in Most Improved, but I wanted to mention him.
Yeah, there's some overlap between those. Go for biggest surprise team. I've got the Cleveland Cavaliers number 1, just having one of the best seasons that we've seen in some time. Like multiple, I think they had 3 double-digit win streaks this season. That was awesome. All these guys who are most surprising players are on there. And particularly like I said, I think it matters the most when you go from not being considered a championship contender to being a championship contender, and they've done that.
Yeah, I have them number 1, and then the Houston Rockets number 2 to be, even if they're maybe a little bit over their heads collectively, to be the 4th best team in net rating this year, to be top 10 in both offense and defense. That is, as somebody who picked their under, that is not something that I expected.
Yeah, take that, plexiglass principle. And Detroit is number 3. I think those 3 are have got to be pretty obvious there. Didn't really have any other teams that I really wanted to talk about there, unless you did.
The Clippers, just briefly. I mean, they're
better.
They're a better team than I thought they were.
Most disappointing, and you've got the terrible triad of Phoenix, Philly, and New Orleans. I had those last month. I had them again. I just couldn't really decide how to treat Dallas, because I don't think they've disappointed relative to the personnel that's been available on the roster, and we have a different award for making stupid trades, so I didn't have them in there.
Yeah, the Pelicans' place in it is a little bit weird just because it has been so injury based. But I mean, even when their guys were available, other than Zion, most of them have been pretty bad. The dishonorable mentions I wanted to just briefly, the Orlando Magic, just not like, and in some ways it was even
Well,
worse
they
when
were
they were
most
healthy.
biggest surprise team at one point, I would have said, or
Yeah.
in the mix
But
for that.
they've been so disappointing when they've been healthy. Like when they've had Ben Caro and Franz Wagner, like I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but they generally, it's been disappointing for them. And
Well,
then
I
just
mean, to also they aren't going to set the record, but to be 2/3 of the way through the year and like the worst 3-point shooting team percentage wise that we've seen since the Bobcats, they're still shooting 31% from three as a team. I mean, Jesus Christ, that's awful.
and then another one just briefly relative to expectations, like the Bucks being this toothless is disappointing to me. And this is even kind of notwithstanding the Damian Lillard like DVT or Damian Lillard blood clots and all that type of stuff. Like there's them like Giannis having this kind of season and them just not really figuring is I was thinking, oh, will they be a sleeping giant? I'm not, I'm just continuing to sleep.
Is that it? Are we done? Is that possible?
I think so. Yeah, what, you know, two
All right.
2 hours.
Well, we're
15
done
minutes.
for today. We got two more podcasts coming tomorrow. So we got a very heavy schedule. Also going to be headed to Portland for the Nike Hoop Summit this week. So I don't know when the hell we're going to talk about that, but we'll find time. We're not limited in terms of the amount of time we can be in front of a microphone this time of year. We are ramping it up. Got to keep track of everything that's going on in the playoff race this week too. So had to get this big one out of the way. We got the whole defense podcast. That's going to be awesome. That'll be this week too. We're going to do our over-under recap as well. We're going to do crystal ball this week. This is a huge week. I was, as I was going through and playing, I'm like, man, we got a lot of awesome shows this week. So a lot of work to put in together, and hopefully it will be worth it for you guys. Thanks so much for subscribing. And if you are not subscribed to our newsletter, free newsletter, you can do so. You can get Dan's Daily Dunks twice per week with that. Or, of course, you can subscribe to Dunc'd On Prime and get every Hollinger Duncan. Dan's writing 5 days a week in written or audio form. And, of course, every one of the podcasts with Danny and me. Talk to y'all next time.